All right, I see a lot of dreamer, doer, and drivers in the audience, and it is 45 after, so we will go ahead and get started. My name is Samantha Becker with Arizona State University's University Technology Office, and I'm so pleased to welcome you today to a discussion about ASU's daily health check journey. I've had the privilege and honor of being a part of this project and working with the wonderful and talented people you're going to hear from today, who have been working together collaboratively with each other and with stakeholders across the university to really develop a solution for an added level of security and safety and health across the ASU community during the pandemic. So without further ado, I want to thank all the panelists and first kick it over to our own Bobby Gray.
All right, thank you, Sam. Welcome to Check Yourself, Technology and Keeping the Campus Healthy during a pandemic session of the Winter Games. My name is Bobby Gray, and I support and guide the Product and Programs Core in the University Technology Office to help facilitate the various portfolios here at ASU. Today, we're going to be talking about how an agile mindset in UTO's organizational structure helped ASU deliver the ASU Daily Health Check in time for the fall 2020 semester. Next slide. To start off, I'm going to give a brief background of the ASU Daily Health Check product, talking about UTO's culture and organization, and finally level set with an agile framework to help consolidate the presentations on the various workflows. Next slide. The ASU Daily Health Check, at its most basic premise, is a series of questions provided in partnership with the Mayo Clinic based off of CDC guidelines to determine if an individual is potentially symptomatic. If so, we provide immediate results to help the individual, help them and determine if they are indeed symptomatic for COVID-19. One of the best ways to prevent the spread of a pandemic is to limit the contact between symptomatic individuals and healthy ones. And this was one of ASU's hallmark approaches to making that happen. With the uncertainty of the pandemic in spring of 2020, institutions took a while to formulate a response. ASU determined to internally build a solution in-house in June of 2020 with a deliverable of August the 15th for the go live. So you can imagine we had quite a bit to do in quite a short time. Also, for something like this, there was no available playbook. I mean, we had to form work streams around legal guidance on employment law, HIPAA data, storage, privacy, ethical use of the data, etc. We had to create cross-departmental working groups were formed to help understand the user impact and the support services needed. We created a iterative design creation with thoughtful, intentional user design, system design and architecture to ensure the various data handling standards between the multiple systems, communication and education of the services and how it fits into ASU's community of care, training and education for our first line support crew in the Experience Center, ensuring we have actionable analytics and real-time reporting with necessary controls, and compliance for continued use of the system, which ties into data and reporting to utilize internal compliance channels, in this case, password expiration. So really what we delivered was a product that was used across both web and a mobile application. There was even a version for our Experience Center to use if somebody needed to call in and take the daily health check, where individuals could, as I talked about, answer a series of questions to determine if they could possibly be symptomatic. As you will hear, it started as this, but continued to evolve as we learned more and more about how our individuals were using the systems and the best practices. The calendaring important, especially, became critically important. Next slide. So here we talk a little bit about the UTO's positive core. The first element of the positive core, Agile First, allowed us to create an iterative development cycle of continual creation based on existing knowledge and direction. This was especially important because if we had waited for all of the decisions to be finalized on how this was going to work, we might still be waiting to start this project. Changes were to be expected, and they happened on a daily basis. As I had mentioned before, there was no playbook, there was no wrong or right way to do this, and so we were continuing to learn through the process on the best manner by which to express this here at ASU. The next 6 all touch on how we're able to organically align to support the initiatives. Collaborations, partnerships, curiosity, alignment, trust, and resourcefulness all allow the teams to form and evolve in an ever-changing environment. Needs and requirements change on an almost daily basis, and the fluidity of the team allowed them to adapt to the situations as needed. The high level of ambiguity necessitated distributed authority and autonomy to the teams without a high level of command and control. Next slide. Here we just want to kind of bring to light in an article by McKinsey and Company, kind of a agile framework by which to talk about the work streams that teams engaged in. Strategy, the really important concept here when working in high levels of ambiguity is the North Star concept. Instead of waiting to be told what to do, this allows for an iterative process to happen in the void of having everything figured out at the start, and really expedites the learnings and feedback cycles. The structure, empower teams. We talked about how we facilitated that through UTO's positive core. The process, the iterations in learning. UI UX was constantly being mocked, distributed for feedback and learning, updated, enhanced, wash, rinse, repeat. And it was extremely important that we could move in such quick learning cycles because we had such varied stakeholders who needed to provide input, from our legal teams to our student services teams to our marketing teams, to make sure we were nailing the tenor and voice. Having those quick iterative learning cycles was really paramount to the success of this product. People, the teams and the institutions understood the necessity of the opportunity in front of us, not just reopening for classes, but providing a safe and healthy environment in which our students, staff, and faculty could thrive. So this allowed individuals to go above and beyond, and not just in sacrificing their time and attention, but also allowing them to express their enthusiasm to ensure we were creating an equitable solution. And then finally, technology. We couldn't have moved as fast as we had if we hadn't already invested in the cloud, APIs, microservices, next generation platforms, and technologies that allow us to develop and iterate quickly and securely. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly and Kari to talk about the execution and iteration of the product development.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Mukerjee with our mobile IoT team at the University Technology Office. Next slide. As the product manager for the creation of a mobile and web application for students and employees to check their daily health, our strategy was to work closely with stakeholders, listen to their needs, develop quickly, and iterate. We adapted the same cyclical workflow we use for the ASU Mobile App, which has been in production for the past 3 years, by starting with the need to address community safety and well-being during this pandemic, creating a product and using feedback to drive further enhancements. So we worked with experts, like Bobby said, that spanned medicine, ethics, student life, employee wellness, and much more to get a holistic view of how to care for the community. We've already iterated several times, actually, since our first release in August 2020, based on data and feedback we received from students and employees using the mobile and web health check apps. Next slide. So in order to produce results in 2-week sprints quickly, we leaned in on teamwork where we had a foundation of trust and relied on proven processes and templates. There were user stories, acceptance criteria, and test plans to make sure both web and mobile worked fluently together. We used Jira to track bugs and enhancements and made sure there were training materials for students and employees to know how to utilize the new tools being built for them. We had to think quickly to address the needs that surfaced, and that included triaging issues that arose. I remember those first 2 weeks looking for patterns and ways to streamline our processes as we individually addressed incoming tickets one by one. We worked long hours with hopes that our users felt cared for with our personalized responses. And we created ways to share updates and currently known issues through collaboration spaces like Google Docs and Slack, so we could help our Experience Center and other Tier 1, Tier 2 support members resolve issues quickly. We've been learning a lot and continue to learn through this process. Next, I'll pass it over to Kari, our UI UX manager, who was instrumental in bringing us all together from a user experience design perspective.
Thanks, Kelly. So we faced some kind of unique challenges with this project, both because of the scope and the timeline, a new remote modality, and then we're used to changing requirements, but this was sort of in SuperDrive. So one of the first challenges we had to tackle was that we had a much broader stakeholder group with varying experience in technology. That scanned legal counsel, the president's office, marketing, human resources, student services, and everybody needed to have input and be on the same page. So we had to develop some new ways to present mock-ups and prototypes and help communicate our direction much earlier in the workflow. We also needed to plan, design, develop, test, and iterate as quickly as possible. To do that, both from a design and development perspective, we leveraged as many existing interactions and UX patterns as we could. So existing elements specifically in the mobile app, like onboarding cards, live cards, the navigation, preferences, notification center, anywhere we could infuse this new workflow into our existing patterns, we found that helped us move a little more quickly. And it helped our users from having to relearn new things. We needed to consider a much broader scope of user touch points. So we wanted to make sure that from a university and holistic perspective, we had a unified message from all of our outlets, and we weren't introducing any sort of redundancies in the platforms we were developing. So in addition to architecture diagrams, we created a lot of journey maps that kind of touched on the potential flows and touch points from different user perspectives over their timeline. And then we needed to provide an especially nuanced experience based on user type and affiliation. And I think this is something that'll become a lot more commonplace as our technology gets smarter. So this was good for us to kind of dip our toes in the water. But we relied really heavily on the comms team to follow policy changes, articulate those revisions to us, get them mocked up, and get them into our kind of user stories. Next slide. So here's an example of a solution we came up with because we couldn't be there in person to kind of whiteboard this stuff out. We used this kind of flow to articulate our user touch points. And the beauty of this was that it was really shareable in a remote modality. So even if I wasn't available to present something to a group, we could pass this along. People could access it at any time and see updates. So we kind of used the vertical columns to touch on our different touch points in the user journey. So what are students seeing on their return to school? What are people seeing on a daily, weekly basis? Or if they're symptomatic, what are the specific mobile app touch points? What does that resource center look like? And then as we were able to mock something up, we included them right here. So we all had a clear understanding of what we were talking about. Next slide. Here is just a small visual of kind of the user type and scenario labels. This is much more extended now, but you can see that for all of our results screens and all of our flows, we said what user type we were talking about, what their status was, whether they're symptomatic or not symptomatic. We're going to be introducing something soon regarding whether or not you're under isolation. So this got a little more complex, but this was a way that we communicated these changes specifically to our development team. Oh, next slide. Here's just a sampling of what our mobile app mockups looked like. And you can kind of see a lot of familiar pages in the ways that we had to infuse health check information into them. We didn't want users to have to search around when you have to do this every day. So we tried to make our onboarding cards really clear. You can see how they're infused into the notification center, the navigation, the live cards, the preferences. We wanted all of this to be really clear for our stakeholder groups so they knew where everything was living. Next slide. I included this because I think this was one of our largest iterations. You can see on the very left, we had a weekly schedule, but it wasn't as prominent as it could have been. And we heard very early on from our users that scheduling the days that they were working so that they could stay in compliance was really, really helpful and really vital. And so we extended that schedule to be monthly. And then we really highlighted that in the live card. So that's the current view in the middle. And then on the right, you can see what the actual scheduling platform looks like. Next slide. And then finally, when we're talking about a user base of upwards of 100,000 users, we needed this to be as accessible as possible for all types of users. So we have our mobile app mockup on the left. We tried to kind of mirror that in a web-based platform, and then users could also call in to the help center and do that via phone as well. And then just to kind of cue up Joe and Frank, this was an especially challenging project. It's not like we kind of handed over a pretty package of requirements and mockups and said, you can start now. Everyone really had to be working in tandem. And so it was incredible what the architecture and engineering teams were able to put together. So on to Joe.
Hello, everybody. My name is Joe McDonald. I am a director in the UTO Engineering Corps and was one of the lead architects in getting this rapid implementation, getting traction on the ground and making real things happen here. So our approach to the architecture from the onset, we took, it was very much with security and compliance as part of the design from the start. Oftentimes, particularly with older engineering shops, they often think of security last. So, but with this, we had, as Bobby mentioned earlier, we had a lot of compliance, HIPAA, PHI, personal health information, data protections, et cetera, that we just needed to make sure we were at every iteration we were doing, those principles were and controls were in place from the start. We had to assemble, of the structure we took, we had to assemble subject matter experts from across all the various product teams, basically what we call technical stakeholders. And these teams were both within the university and external to the university because we had to partner with third parties with this as well. And when you have multiple teams that are varying expertise levels and usually they're used to doing one thing one way and other teams are doing things other ways, we wanted to make sure that there were clear definitions of which teams were in scope for which areas of responsibility, and that the interfaces between those various components were clearly understood, so we knew the inputs and outputs for the data flow. When we started as the architecture design for this, the entire thing was sort of in scope for HIPAA and compliance requirements. But as we iterated through it and we really got into the meat of this, we were able to shrink the scope of which components needed to have which compliance controls in place. And so that helped us really reduce our risk from the onset. As that architecture iteration was, or architecture design was iterated on and adjusted, as was noted earlier, sometimes daily the requirements were changing for us. We had a larger architecture scope that everybody was on the same page, so that while they were each focused on their little element, they were aware of the big picture, and that helped everybody sort of stay on track for getting their pieces delivered and modularized. And the technology, we leveraged existing platforms where possible. We emphasized sustainability, and we took advantage of newer cloud-based serverless technologies and design, and applied DevOps principles from the onset. So that made the iteration and the sprinting that we were doing seamless for a lot of the teams. With that, I will hand it over to Frank, who will talk about the implementation with our Salesforce Work.com partner.
Thanks, Joe. Hello, all. I'm Frank Montoya, Enterprise Product Owner here at ASU, Enterprise Salesforce Product Owner here at ASU, and also manage the Enterprise Salesforce team and operations at ASU. So, as noted, our students earlier discussed and employees were given tools and the user interface via the ASU Mobile App and some access to a health check portal to provide health check data. So the solution design and architecture that Joe just talked about also had to support an application and user interface so that we could support our internal resources responsible for exposure management, also known as contact tracing. So as a result, ASU leveraged our existing relationship with Salesforce to quickly procure a Work.com application. That application fulfilled the need for the HIPAA compliance that we talked about earlier, and a secure platform, very important. So as a result of that, Work.com, which is a Salesforce world-class solution, is leveraged today to consolidate the data that we've been talking about, the exposure management, and some reporting. So we leverage existing processes, relationships, and that organizational agility that we've been talking about. That allowed us to iterate and initiate the procurement mid-June, and then go full court press with development starting mid-July. So it was key to move quickly, and we were able to not only do that with development, but also even through the procurement process because of the relationships we already had established with Salesforce. Next slide. So relative to the implementation of Work.com, the Salesforce team used the previously discussed, again, organizational agility practices to identify user requirements, complete the configuration, the integration, the security, and the development needed to support those users of the Salesforce Work.com application. The team really leveraged the existing skill sets. We had existing administrators, developers, business analysts that we were able to leverage so that we could identify existing integrations, get those completed, put in the data model, etc. So utilizing the existing skill set was key. The team also utilized the defined development lifecycle, migration and communication, and even governance processes that were already established here at ASU for the Salesforce Enterprise application to move things quickly. The technology, we leveraged a Jira, which was already in place. The structure was already in place so that we could manage and track those project development tasks. So again, being agile and reusing what we already had. So engaging in these organizational agility practices along with hard work was really key to successfully standing up the Work.com application and giving users the interface that they needed in about a 2-week period. So we continue to enhance the application with automation and user interface. And we, as of now, we continue to enhance and evolve with some automation and utilize those agility practices. So I will, next slide. And I think this is where we get more into compliance reporting. So I'll turn it over to Joe McDonald and Zachary Walker.
Yeah, hey everyone. My name's Zach, and I'm a part of the data innovation team at UTO. Next slide, please. So obviously, we're getting a ton of data with this application, but what good is it if we're not using it in any way? So the most important piece that we're looking at is compliance. Everyone's required to essentially interact with the health check in any given day, whether that's via the schedule that Kari mentioned, scheduling, hey, I have the day off, or just taking the health check, yes or no, are you going to be on campus? Yes or no, are you having any symptoms? Stuff like that. So just doing one of those things is what's defined as compliance. And that was the most important thing for the executives to see at the very first, because obviously you need everyone to buy into this strategy if you're going to keep the campus safe. So we need near live data, which is not a normal ask. Usually we have stuff that's refreshing nightly. This stuff needs to be refreshing pretty much as it comes in. And then also need that data on the password expirations. We had about a week to develop because like we mentioned, it's a very, very stressed development timeline. And so we started right around the time that the application launched in August. We did the employee dashboards in about a week, and we did the student dashboards in the following week. So like I just said, we've got 2 sets of dashboards, employee and student. Those are published on a Tableau server. And then we've also got emails going out to department heads. So that's how we're reporting that. And then the biggest part of this project is really the buy-in from all of the people everywhere. Like I've been at ASU for a year and a half. I think I've met more people working on this project than I have for the rest of my time at ASU. I've got friends and family who attend ASU or interact with ASU texting me about bugs and stuff like that. And it really helps with that kind of base to be able to QA things much faster. And then the sheer amount of technology that we used for this, obviously we've already talked about the mobile app and the website interfaces, but we used our operational data store to store everything. We did a lot of work with Alteryx workflows, which is a data processing tool. And then obviously publishing it all onto the Tableau server that I already mentioned. We actually had to increase the size of our Tableau server because of some of this stuff, because it's just so much data. And if we jump to the next slide, we've actually got a look at one of the dashboards here. As we can see, compliance is staying pretty high. Employees are usually upper to high 90s, and then students are like mid to upper 80s usually. And with, like Kari mentioned earlier, about 100,000 users, that's no small feat. We're very happy with that. We can see this is a screenshot from December, so not a lot of people on campus, either students or employees. Then we've got password expirations over on the right there, and I'm going to pass it back to Joe McDonald to talk a little more about that.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So we had the team had a challenge presented to them. This daily health check was a requirement as university policy, new university policy from the administration. And so we had to come up with a way to, as I like to say, motivate the community to perform the daily health check-in. And this wasn't just about, hey, making sure everyone pushes buttons on their phone or on a web page. It was more about raising awareness and having the user community be cognizant of any symptoms that they may have before coming onto campus every day, so that if there was a potential at risk, they were cognizant of that, they were aware of that, and could adjust as necessary. So the decision for that was we were going to expire their passwords. We needed to define clear rules for who is in scope and who is not in scope, who is going to be on campus, who is not going to be on campus. And that was, like say, as was mentioned earlier, that iterated, because now we have scheduling, so people can schedule what days they're going to be on campus, what days they're not going to be on campus, and we had to be able to clearly articulate who was in compliance and who was not. So the users who had not submitted a check-in after 2 days on the mobile app or the website, or called into our experience center to do it over the phone, they would have their passwords expired. So what that meant was that after their password had been expired, the next time they went to go log into an ASU service, they would be prompted and challenged to say your password had expired, you got to choose a new one. We enforced password history so they couldn't reuse their password. The key takeaway for this was that we didn't want to stop people from being productive, especially if they just missed, oops, I'm not exhibiting symptoms, so I just forgot to submit the health check. We didn't want to stop them. We didn't want to lock their account out and then have them be stuck waiting to get through to the experience center to have someone unlock their account. That would have likely have been a nightmare and would have flooded our service desk. So this was sort of that happy medium where there was enough of a impact or disruption, but not too disruptive, so that we could eventually help people get into that change of behavior. This really was at the core a behavioral change. Every single day, do a self-health check. Make sure that you are not exhibiting symptoms before coming onto campus. To accomplish this, we had coordination across various teams across the university so it was clear rules for who was identified and who was not. And as I mentioned earlier, the enforcement of that was on our web portal via our single sign-on. In addition to that, we also send out emails to users who are at risk for password expiration to remind them to complete the health check-in. And a lot of the user community got a little annoyed with that, but after a while, it sort of it sunk in because they realized, or we were stressing the importance of doing this so that we could reopen the campus and have it be as safe and secure as possible for our community so that they could thrive in their educational experience. And with that, I will turn it over to Corinna to talk about our communications.
Thank you, Joe. Hi, everyone. My name is Corinna Busciglio Kamilli, and I work with the Creative and Communications team at UTO. Our team helped with the strategic communication rollout, and I'm so happy to be here with you today. Next slide. One of the most important pieces of our communication strategy was making sure the health check information got to every student and employee, since a new daily behavioral change would be taking place. This was a unique challenge given the size and scope of ASU and the ever-present pandemic. To roll out the health check to ASU's community of 100,000 plus members, we had to stand up 6 different work streams for the structuring and execution of our plan. Each work stream was responsible for taking the key messaging and distributing it. Next slide, please. With a strategy in place, deploying our communications became a reality. Now, this is really the fun part. The communication kits were given to each department's communication team to help disseminate the information. The neat thing about the kits is it was the first time in ASU history a deployment has been given to communicators in this way. Since a kit went to over 33 departments and teams, they didn't have to reinvent or translate the material in any way. The content of the communication kit included slide decks for town hall style presentations, infographics, and email and Slack messaging. The kit also included different tones of messaging coming from leadership and peer-to-peer. We continue to update these kits periodically when new features are released, and this has been a very helpful way for us to stay in touch with our community. Next slide, please. We used quite a mixture of technology and to reach our community. And this was chosen based off of what had been successful for us in the past. So we used G Suite for the collaborative communication kits I just discussed. We used Salesforce Marketing Cloud for those reminder emails Joe was talking about. We used Slack for internal messaging. We used Adobe Creative Cloud for a lot of our imagery. We used all the social medias we could. And we, of course, used our faithful Zoom. And with that, I would love to introduce Gigi Speaks, who will be discussing the Experience Center process. Thank you, Gigi.
Thanks, Corinna. Hello, my name is Gigi Speaks, and I'm with the ASU Experience Center, which is our contact center focused on providing support to the ASU community, which includes staff, faculty, students, potential students, and we operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our team consists of 180 staff members with a purpose to drive retention, elevate graduation rates, as well as overall student success. The contact center also acts as a liaison for external sources who are interested in providing the level of support that we are able to provide. Next slide. I wanted to present some numbers so that in 2020, the demand for our services exceeded over 1 million contacts. That was through inbound phone calls, chats, and cases. Of those, from August 10th, 2020 through December 31st, we assisted approximately 26,861 members of our ASU family in completing their health checks. We offered several ways to get this completed, as you heard earlier, which included being able to call into the Experience Center if the other options didn't work for you, or you just needed some extra support. As you can see over the months, the number of health check related calls decreased because, as Bobby mentioned, we continued to improve this product, which enabled our ASU community to control and complete their health checks through self-service options. The Experience Center team, oh, sorry, next slide. The Experience Center team had a short time frame before we were to go live with this added support service, but we were able to leverage already built frameworks that allowed us to move quickly on setting up new services. We had to hire, train, create processes to support the health check initiative, which while simultaneously managing the other approximately 40 plus services that we currently offer. Thanks to having built a stable organization, we had the ability to strategize quickly on required resources, technology, processes, and communication related to this service. We had great partnerships and open communication channels with many teams to keep us informed and current. We're fleshing out processes that allowed us to immediately share information on anything that was going wrong through setting up ways to quickly escalate issues and concerns by working with our Salesforce team to develop a process in our current ticketing system to get cases to groups that were not leveraging that ticketing system. With our established training, documentation, and process standards, it allowed us to continuously adapt to ongoing changes surrounding the health check requirements. While we had many moving parts, we were able to work on competing priorities, like I said, simultaneously. We also focused on the technology that would allow our team to execute successfully. So we created training materials that we placed as online tutorials that staff could be assigned. We leveraged our in-contact phone platform to generate a new phone number, built scripts and options through our IVR, and provided recorded messages that were outbound. The health check web form that was designed for our staff to submit on behalf of our callers. We had to be trained on that quickly. We also leveraged Slack and created specific channels to communicate effectively and quickly to disseminate information as well as receive information. We got knowledge-based articles up so our staff had a repository of information to work off of. We worked with our comms team quite extensively. With our staff, communication, inclusion, and teamwork was and is vital to the component, is a component to our success in creating processes and collaborative partnerships that allowed our staff to be able to provide the level of support that was needed in handling a new health check related service with the sensitivity and understanding that was needed. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for joining us for our presentation today. While we had a few people speaking, they represent a large number of staff and stakeholders that were instrumental to the success of the product. It truly does take a village pulling in the same direction, supporting each other to accomplish a task so important and complex in such a short time. I hope we were able to provide some insight into how our use of the agile mindset in our culture, organizational structure, and processes allowed us to quickly meet the opportunities and challenges of opening a large public university safely in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you once again, and if we have some time, we'd be happy to answer any questions.